Hello, Solarpunks, and welcome to Season 6, Episode 1 of Solarpunk Presents. In this episode, Ariel and I talk about outrage, the emotion even Solarpunks love to wallow in at this particular moment in history. It's very, very popular right now, very, very on trend. And, can outrage ever be a good thing? Before we dive into the episode, I want to say thanks for your patience with our hiatus. Both Ariel and I needed a little break after 50 episodes non-stop, plus bonus episodes, so even more than 50 episodes. Although, as we both ended up dealing with major family emergencies, didn't end up being much in the way of rest and relaxation. Well, anyways, we're back now, and don't forget we need your support, so join our Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like our videos. Thanks. And now here's the episode.
Hey listeners, welcome to our first episode of Season 6. And we are starting off with a bang. Here's a topic for modern times. Outrage. As in, how dare you do that to me? Or, can you believe that?
While outrage can be the right response to truly outrageous things, like injustice, cruelty, violence, and wanton environmental devastation, it can also be a choice to self-indulgently wallow in emotion. As with its cousins, self-righteousness and the mantle of victimhood, outrage can also be a political tool, or maybe even weapon, that fires up its bearers, unites them, and gives them the power to call for things, fight for things, and do things that are actually terribly wrong, all without having to feel guilty for the harms that they are doing.
So let's talk about this today. And to what extent outrage is a solarpunk place to go?
So, outrage, well, nothing new. I mean, it really is a major malaise of modern times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a type of bullying. I mean, it can be. It's a type of bullying where the bullies, acting as individuals, mobs, or even communities, can feel good about the bullying that they're doing, right? And I don't mean this, when outrage is justified. I just mean this when people just go to outrage because they feel like being outraged, or they feel like bullying someone, or they feel like, right, having a social media pile-on, or even just leaving crappy comments on posts that people put, here, there, and everywhere on social media.
Well, it's a self-indulgent emotion and it really makes you feel powerful. So, it can feel so good to be offended or horrified with the actions or words of others because then when you respond, you know that you're in the right. In these modern times, it's difficult to feel like you have a firm stance on a lot of things. And those stances can always sort of be challenged. But then when you are outraged, it sort of feels like you have a strong stance that you're coming from because your anger gives you that strength. So the temptation to wallow in the self-righteousness of outrage is really strong because it's easy and it doesn't require a whole heck of a lot of thought. You can just let your emotions take over.
Okay, so that's an interesting thought. Why is it difficult to have a firm stance in modern times? I mean, people do have firm stances, so I'm curious to hear what you mean by this.
I have found it difficult to have a firm stance, just because I, at every corner, am realizing how small my world is and how much bigger other people's experiences are, and how the things that I say can maybe be hurtful to other people. Or if I hold a certain opinion, like sex work is bad and wrong and is always immoral and terrible, that is a sort of black and white view that doesn't account for things like people who do sex work who don't find it degrading, who do find it to be a good source of income, and is a way for them to make ends meet within this horrible capitalist society.
Okay, this is weird because I don't really see you as someone who has black and white standpoints on things. I see you as someone who does nuance. So.
Okay, nowadays I am that sort of person, but let me tell you, when I was 17, things were very black and white.
Yeah, well, come on. When you're a teenager, you don't have much life experience yet, right? And you're still figuring it all out. Even if you don't realize, you're still figuring it all out.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in my 20s, I had a lot of of chances to figure it all out. I often felt that I was standing on quicksand, and that whole adage of like, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything kind of thing was like, echoing through the back of my brain. And I was like, nah. But I think having a like my firm stance is what is the kindest and most compassionate response in whatever scenario. And I don't always do that. That is very difficult for me
It's
to,
difficult for everybody.
yeah. I mean, like, but that, like, so my first response, my gut sort of instinct is often along those lines of black and white, whereas my like second thoughts are a little bit more nuanced. But my gut response goes straight to, being outraged or wallowing in self-righteousness because I don't know, it just feels good, man. It gives me lots of dopamine.
Oh, that's so weird. I only know you over the internet here. We've never met in real life. That is just not my image of you.
Oh, when I read comment sections, and there are certain comments, I haven't gone so far as to sign up for an account to comment on those comments,
Okay,
but I've gotten really close
here's my question. Why are you reading comments?
because it makes me feel good to be angry at people.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Oh my God, this totally,
this is my
I'm,
dirty little secret, I guess.
wow. Oh, I'm completely blown away. I'm totally blown away by this. Oh wow, okay. Because I just can't imagine you, like, instead of trying to understand what someone actually meant by something that was badly worded or ambiguously worded, or full of nuance, I just don't see you going for the dramatics instead.
Well, I should know all the terms for this in terms of brain science, but you know how like there's sort of the older part of the brain that sort of kicks in right away. And that is the part where I respond with outrage and where I really like that outrage. And then the newer part of the brain that we have developed over, like however many millions of years of evolution, to sort of like give second thoughts and temper that and basically be human is what sort of prompts me to be quiet and stay in my own lane.
Okay, I don't know
Yeah.
anything about the old part of the brain. I don't know if I subscribe to
Oh,
that kind of
okay.
theory
Oh,
of.
no, no, no. It's part of evolutionary biology. Like there is actually an older part of the brain that most animals have. And then in human brains, we've developed a larger prefrontal cortex, I believe it is. Don't quote me on that.
I'll fact
Um,
check, don't worry. What Ariel is talking about with this old part of the brain is the limbic system, also known as the emotional nervous system. And this is indeed one of the oldest structures in the human brain. And it's the driving force behind your natural instincts to do things like eat and drink, or produce and care for the next generation of human beings. It's also responsible for the fight or flight response and other reactions to your surroundings. So, the things that make you really angry and make evil social media posts, comments, whatever, in reaction to things that get you all steamed up.
I listened to a
Because
podcast on
you
this
said
science once.
yeah, okay.
No, I actually did read a couple of books about it. And the information has just completely left my head. But basically, it's that part of the brain where we are able to process and take a step back and think, like we're able to think about the context and the pros and cons of these situations without being, quote unquote slaves to our instincts kind of thing.
And as I get older, the more I realize that emotions are kind of a choice on some level. Like you have them and you can just go with it, or you can be like, okay, this is not serving me. And then maybe
Yeah.
I
I
need to
wouldn't
step back
say
from this.
it's not a choice to experience the emotions, but it's a choice to act on the emotions, I would
Or you
say.
or a choice to keep riding with it, right?
Yeah,
You
I
can be
mean,
like, I'm feeling grief right now, or I'm feeling anger, and I don't need to keep going down this road. Right?
yeah, I mean,
I can step back from this. I can get this under control. I'm not just an animal, right?
yeah, that's the whole counting to 10 thing, right? Like you count 10 and that gives you the space to sort of think about the situation and think, why am I angry? Like, am I really angry or am I actually afraid? Or am I actually, like what's going, like what is this emotion? We are not very, our culture doesn't really help us have a lot of vocabulary for emotions. And so often we'll think that we're angry or outraged or something like that, when really it's a different emotion that we're having. It might be fear or dread or excitement, honestly. Usually it's a negative emotion that's being, like it's easier to just call it being angry or to experience it as anger because we know that and it's more familiar for us.
So, what is it about this particular point in history that has so many people feeling fear and dread and uncertainty and insecurity that they're channeling it into outrage? I mean, okay,
Mhm.
it's not one thing, obviously. It's like a perfect storm of awfulness right now.
Well, I mean, speaking of that perfect storm of awfulness, if there was no such thing as social media or TV, we wouldn't know about most of the things that are happening in the world right now. I wouldn't know about most of the things that are happening in my own country right now, those things just wouldn't be part of my consciousness. And I would live my life sort of more focused on, I guess, the things that I can control, and it gives me more of an empowered, positive view on things when I can control things, like municipal politics and things that my neighbors are doing, as opposed to federal politics or like the US election, which I can do absolutely nothing about. And yet, our Canadian media is flooded with US politics. We know more up here about US politics than we do about our own politics. And
Well,
often,
it's
actually, people up here talk about free speech. We don't have free speech. Free speech is not a thing that is in
well,
our, um,
yeah, people here misunderstand it, but this is part of the outrage thing,
yeah,
right? This is like you're infringing on my right to say whatever I want and all this stuff. So,
exactly.
they're also my spouse was in a sort of local community meeting, and so there's a few conservative. It's the countryside. They think differently in the countryside. It's not an urban area. It's
Mhm.
and there are a few far right people who live next door to us and up the street and all this, and they were complaining like, yeah, there's no freedom of speech anymore. You can't say what you want, blah blah blah. And so my spouse, he grew up in East Germany, and he's like,
Mhm.
you people don't know what you're talking about, and you're saying anything you want, and no one's putting you in prison. So you say something that is no longer socially acceptable because it's not nice, and people complain, and people don't want to frequent your businesses, whatever. That's not the same thing as being put in prison. So
Yeah, that's
just
like,
shut up, you know?
oh no, the consequences of my actions.
Yeah, exactly. I
You
mean, like
know,
if
like
if
if you're,
society's norms have changed and you've been left behind, then that's how
it's
it
up to you to
goes.
adapt,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. But that they're being outraged, right? I'm outraged because I can no longer say racist, sexist things. My rights are being trampled on.
we can
Yeah.
just call people names instead of, like actually figuring out, like how we can help them or, like reach out to understand their
Or
situation
just be a
or
nice person, you know? So, I mean, I think it's really sad that instead of, I think the average, the average person today, instead of trying to understand what someone actually means by something, that was badly worded or, has nuance associated with it, goes for the dramatics instead. Sometimes people willfully misunderstand something. I look at some of
Mhm.
the quotes, the comments we get under our YouTube videos, and I'm thinking, God, you people are, you don't want to understand this. I mean, you clearly haven't even watched the 30-second video. And people don't seem to be interested in trying to find common ground in humanity with people that we don't identify with.
Mhm.
Even the best of us aren't really doing this. And we often use outrage to shut them down and to reinforce the barriers between us. And I think right now we need to stop driving ourselves apart. And I realize like it's not symmetric. One side is less moral than the other. I'm happy to say that.
Mhm.
But still I think we need to find common ground with people. So I've been dealing with a medical emergency here with my mother who's gotten too old to live by herself. And across the street from us is a fairly conservative guy. I don't certainly don't agree with all of his opinions, but he's been so kind to my mother, and he's made it possible for her to live here by herself with me living in another country. I realize it's really important for us to be able to talk to each other and to see that, I can see that he has all this good in him, even if I don't agree with all of his positions. I feel like we just got to start doing these kinds of things.
Hmm.
Even if we do find some people's opinions a little bit not abhorrent, obviously. That's a bridge too far, but we got to also forgive people for not being perfect in our views.
Yeah, are not living up to some standard that we have in our heads. But I mean, it is worth saying, like if some people hold beliefs that you find are just repugnant, do they
But
act on those beliefs all the time? Or, like, does that color every single aspect of their being?
I wouldn't say his views are repugnant. I would say
Hmm.
some of them are a little bit misguided, and maybe,
Uh,
you know, I don't think he's a big fan of welfare, right? And I think he thinks
yeah,
people are
repugnant was
lazy and
maybe
blah
a
blah blah.
big,
Yeah, he
repugnant was
doesn't
maybe a little bit too strong.
he's not full on MAGA or anything like that,
Right.
So, but I have, of course, I'm like, I don't want to know what his opinion on Trump is, but I'd like to think he thinks Trump is an idiot. And so sometimes we just won't talk about that. No,
Mhm.
I think he's conservative as opposed to far right. And so he also knows that my mother is kind of lefty, but instead of being like, he worries about her, and he's done, they've really gone above and beyond to help take care of her. I mean, he's just a neighbor, right? So
Yeah. Seeing the humanity in someone who maybe doesn't have all the same political views as you is helpful. Yeah.
yeah, and it's what we're not doing right now. Anyways.
Yeah. I mean like coming back to outrage though, because outrage is just so like it's easier for us to do that than to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? Instead of doing what your neighbor's or what your mother's neighbor is doing and reaching out to help someone if that's what the situation calls for, when we're outraged, we just override that sense of shared humanity and we just blast them with outrage instead. So, like, I'm thinking of, the demonization of refugees and so-called illegal migrants.
which
The
has which has a huge racism component in
Oh,
it.
it does. It does. But I mean, have people thought about, like the context of these people, like they're leaving behind their families, they're leaving behind their villages, they're leaving behind everything that they've ever known. What is the story behind why that person has done that? And like what's the sort of cultural implications of that? Seeing a person as a human embedded within a certain society, it just takes a lot of effort, a lot of thought. And sometimes we don't want to have sympathy because it's just easier to be outraged, because it makes us, feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, I think there's also fear there, fear of like these people who come from a different culture and speak a different language,
Mm.
and I think people, I think people are embracing that fear without realizing that they are actually the ones with all the power.
Going back to talking about how we mistake sometimes other emotions for anger. So mistaking this fear for anger or just channeling this fear directly into anger, not stopping to inspect why that's maybe irrational.
I don't think people like to feel fear. Fear is emotion that you're weak, you're on the weak side, right? But outrage is like you're on top. If you have outrage, you have power.
I mean, when you're angry, then you don't have to think about how afraid you are, right?
The power of outrage is interesting. So, if you can muster outrage in yourself and others, you can shut your opponents down and you can divide and conquer, right? So if you can get this group against, pitted against that group, and then all these groups are groups that you want to push down because you want to be on top. And I don't think people are really thinking about it this intellectually, but that's what they're doing.
When emotions are in the driver's seat, bad things happen. And I am not saying, by the way, that people should not have emotions, that people should be just cold, logical, like feelingless beings or whatever, because emotions are a very important part of being human.
Well,
But
they're
they
how we make
shouldn't,
decisions, right?
yeah,
So,
they shouldn't be, like in the driver's seat all of the time. There is a place and a time for, like acknowledging your emotions and they're part of a healthy makeup, right? But and they should inform your decisions, but they shouldn't be the sole driving force kind of thing.
Yeah, no, they're an advisor. I mean, emotions are a wonderful, can be also be a wonderful part of life.
Yeah, I
But we
mean,
just shouldn't wallow in them.
no, for sure. Like, but I was going to say, like, outrage can be a force for good, for example. Like, we can channel it positively. Sometimes people, groups, communities, and governments have done horrible things, and outrage can actually propel us to speak out and to act out against them, to stop the bad thing that's happening or to secure some justice for harm that's been done in the past. This sort of outrage, like this sort of positive outrage can change things for the better.
Yeah,
And
well,
so
like all this outrage for over what's happening in Gaza right now. Like I don't know how much is actually changing the situation, but I think this outrage is important because bad things
yeah,
are, I mean, it's a horribly complicated situation, but what's happening there right now is unacceptable.
yeah, exactly,
And
exactly. And
if
it's
people
it's
weren't
help
outraged by it, there wouldn't be protests against it. There wouldn't, and there wouldn't, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much this is actually moving up to the halls of power and actually changing their position
it
on
it
things.
is. It is actually. Well, here municipally, I don't know about like federally or anything like that, but there are, municipal MPPs and provincial MPs around here who have started to think and change their positions on what's happening because of public pressure
Yeah,
and
so
saying,
that's when
like,
outrage
please
is
remember
good.
that you are human and these are human beings
Yeah,
that, like we should,
treat
respect your
them like human
dignity.
beings.
Without outrage or outcry, then these bad things just kind of fly under the radar. Or because no one seems to care, bad actors can continue on without hindrance or consequence. So outrage can really help draw attention to something that is wrong, seriously
Right.
wrong within
Right. So I
society.
mean there's all sorts of other horrid things happening in the world where there isn't outrage about it. In Sudan, for
Right,
instance,
yeah. I mean, there
and
there is outrage, but it's not as
it's different.
so.
Somehow in the global north, we don't really see this as being our conflict that we are somehow morally tied up in. And we're not
Yeah.
outraged that one side is doing this to the other side. Yeah. So again, without the outrage, there's no action and it just, as you say, flies under the radar and it's
Hmm.
not our problem. So we
Yeah.
can use outrage to make something our problem.
Yes, it's true. Outrage can be, contagious in a good way that way, I guess. Like
Right.
if someone is outraged and they then take the time to explain to you why they're outraged and why you should be outraged because of serious human rights violations,
Yeah,
like
when
then
outrage is
and
appropriate,
yeah,
then
yeah.
it should be used as a tool. Absolutely. Absolutely. Outrage has also been used as a method for policing social norms. Okay,
Hmm.
for better and probably also, I definitely also for worse, right?
Hmm.
You can think of all sorts of current examples of changing social norms where both sides are outraged. I mean, so look at the discussion over transgender women, for example.
Hmm.
Outrage on both sides there.
I
Yeah.
would say one side definitely has that positive outrage and the other side has a negative sort of
Yeah,
outrage.
from
But
our
like,
perspective, from our
yeah,
perspective, and from the other perspective, they would say the exact same thing, right? And I think both sides would be like, you're being immoral. And I would say they're wrong and our side is right.
yeah, I
You'd
don't
think it
think
would
that the
be
other
clear
side has
cut.
a leg to stand
One
on,
side is
but
bullying and the other side is just trying to survive,
yeah, well,
you
because
know?
I think the outrage of the, turfs and stuff like that is, it's not really rage, it's fear, you know?
Yeah,
It's
probably. Yeah.
it's not really like
But
it's
then
it is
they're
not
hurting people.
true.
They're
It is
hurting
not
people with their fear and insecurity.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not true outrage to try and get things changed positively and to benefit the world. It is a fear response.
Self-indulgent. It's this
Yeah,
self-indulgent, it's this,
yeah. I can't fault some people for being afraid, but I can fault them for, like acting on that fear in a way that hurts other people,
yeah. I mean,
Like,
and again, it's not a black and white issue. There are shades of nuance in here, but we can't address them and discuss them and resolve them if you've got this one side that just flips out
mhm.
and gets mean because they're outraged, because they're afraid. Again, I think this is part of the whole political climate where social norms have been shifting. We've got to deal with climate change. All the money is distilling up to the billionaires and the rest of us are struggling. Oh my God.
Mm.
So, I mean, I've been in Los Angeles dealing with my mom's situation for the past, I guess, 10 days now, 2 weeks, something like that. The days blur together. And life here is a freaking struggle. And people are behaving atrociously because of it. I mean, there are amazing numbers of very kind, very nice people that I've been dealing with in hospitals and care homes and all this stuff. And they're all paid terribly and overworked and all of this. But out on the roads, it's like Mad Max out there. Oh my God. It's it's terrifying.
That does
And you
sound terrifying.
and it didn't used to be like this. This is like in the last 5 years. And I just
Mm.
realized people are fighting so hard to survive because it is brutal here and
Mhm.
unforgiving. And it's everything's so expensive and people aren't making enough money.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, it's getting like that up here in terms of things getting so expensive and people aren't making enough money. Like, I think that LA is, a couple years ahead of where we are
Oh,
at.
I hope
Um,
I hope we turn the tide.
I
And I
hope so
think
too.
I think we need to direct outrage in the right direction, which is towards these billionaires who are getting all the money and these companies that are
Yeah.
eating all the other companies. And oh, and my God, here. So I normally don't use a smartphone because I just have this gut feeling that there's a little bit something wrong about all the privacy issues and all this kind of stuff. But I've been forced to use a
Just a little bit.
smartphone and
Yeah.
I've been having to deal with my mom's because she's like, what do I do with the emails? I'm like, oh, don't,
Yeah.
wah. So that's hard to see. It's really hard to see. My mom used to be quite a sharp cookie, and now she's terrified by her emails. And she gets hundreds of emails a day because she's ended up, every time she's bought something, they put her on a mailing list,
Yeah.
and it's everything here is like they're just trying to get your money and all the phishing as well. But the constant onslaught of this stuff
That's
is
terrifying.
it's exhausting is what it is. And this is what I
Yeah.
had completely shut the door on. So I'm getting my first glimpse at this world. And I'm thinking, how do people live this way? I
Yeah,
can't
well,
wait till I've got all this resolved. I go back home, I pull out the US SIM card,
yeah.
don't have to deal with this crap anymore.
Yeah, going back to like how outrage is easy, like, like it's just when you're exhausted, it's hard to spend time trying to understand other people. When you're tired, you just don't have the energy for that. Or I mean, I
Yeah,
don't certainly.
probably. Hmm.
It's just much easier to be angry, and because we have this idea that being angry gets stuff done. If we intimidate
Well,
other people
it's a
and we
good way to
can,
kick yourself in the butt, right? Or to kick
yeah,
other people in
yeah,
the butt. Get moving.
yeah, that's not a great way to treat people and not a great way to treat yourself. But
No,
when
but
you're
when
tired and
you're
overworked
yeah,
by, the system that we're
yeah.
in,
And
that,
you're outraged because it's messed up. You're
yeah,
just misdirecting your outrage.
yeah,
I
exactly.
think just all of us are doing this to some extent. So one major question I have,
Hmm.
going back to the idea of outrage being used to police social norms, is when did it take over from shame?
Hmm.
Which I think is what we used to use. So, right, remember we've all been in school and had to read the Scarlet Letter, at least if you went to school in the US, about this
I didn't
woman.
have to read the Scarlet Letter, but I know what you are talking about.
Right, so this woman ends up committing adultery with a priest because she's been kind of sort of quasi abandoned by her husband, sort of not really. And then the whole novel is about how the different characters deal with shame and guilt and revenge. And she transcends the whole thing because she refuses to accept shame. She sort of
Hmm.
embraces her pariah status and becomes this kind of yeah, she transcends it, but then the shame it completely
Hmm.
destroys the priest character or the preacher or whatever he was. Sorry, I probably haven't read this since like 20 years, in the
Hmm.
last 20 years, but this is what I remember. And of course, revenge completely eats the soul of her husband, who who eventually shows up and remains incognito and extracts
Hmm.
his revenge uh, over the course of the book. So because in the early US years and all the Puritans and all of that, shame was how they kept people in line.
Yep.
But we don't. So I think there's related a little bit to outrage. You can feel shame because people outraged at what you've done, but you can shame people without being outraged, right? So shame for me, they're related. Like shame revolves around influencing the inner emotions of the person who has transgressed the social norm or harmed someone else. But you don't have to be outraged or filled with anger toward this person in order to shame them. You can just feel morally superior to them, or
I
maybe
think
just
we still,
disappointed in them.
yeah, I mean, like, I think we still do use shame in the modern era, but it's more sort of like it's been eclipsed by outrage. Shame is still something I think that is used to police women a lot, women and girls. They're
It forces people to self-police themselves.
yeah, yeah, you have your sort of inner panopticon to channel Foucault. And you
Oh,
are just
you always have
always
such pretty words. I used to think
well,
I had a big vocabulary, but now
it
I'm
just
like,
means that you're
okay.
always looking at yourself, you know?
Hmm.
You're always, like seeing yourself through the eyes of another. You have this double consciousness, where you are aware not only of you're not only thinking your own thoughts, but you're thinking the thoughts of the other people who must be reacting to you. And so you dress a certain way, or like put your makeup on a certain way or don't, depending on how you want other people to react to you or not, right? And so this is something I think that is not super prevalent throughout all of society now, but
There are certainly people who are incapable of feeling shame. Doesn't work on them
yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
I will
exactly.
not
I mean,
name names. I'm sure everyone's thinking of a few larger personalities, though, who
yes,
cannot
yeah,
be shamed.
yeah. I think, like shame is something that works really well, especially on younger people. And then I think our society is in the throes of evolving towards maybe not responding to negative social pressure so much,
Which is
like
kind
not
of
letting that.
scary. I mean, it's good and it's bad, right? Because shame only works on people who are capable of feeling that emotion, but it can be a terrible, terrible weapon that can be used to enforce very cruel social norms.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, if there wasn't some way of getting people to adhere to good social norms, I mean, that's kind of
Hmm.
scary too. I mean, social
Shame.
norms are what glue society together. So if you're just going to blow through them because you're
Yeah.
shameless,
I mean, in my neighborhood, actually just a couple of doors or a couple of blocks away, there's someone who's openly flying the Nazi flag on their
okay, that is
on their
completely
porch.
shameless.
And
Holy cow.
I'm sort of like, I wonder how their neighbors feel about that. What is the shame sort of like should you not feel ashamed to represent such horrible ideas and such a horrible history? But obviously, with the rise of neo-Nazism, that is not something that is impinging on folks' consciousness. So I think
Oh,
that there is sort of a positive, like, feeling shame for transgressing, I guess, against the human morality itself. But otherwise, I just don't think that we should be using shame as like a power method to like control other people. Like I don't know. I just feel like that's so negative. But you make a really good point, Christina, in that like, yeah, I want those people who like are flying the Nazi flag to feel ashamed of themselves and like reinspect their priorities. Because like, what the heck?
wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, yeah, because to feel that they have the freedom to do that without censure is shocking from their neighbors because that totally transgresses the things that we say we believe in. And
Yeah. I mean,
and I mean, come
it's
on, the
been
Nazis,
known
they're
that
just the
there's,
bad guys, right? Like everybody
yeah.
knows that.
Well, it's been known that there's like been neo-Nazi groups in our town for a while, but they've never been so open about it,
Oh,
you know?
that's crazy.
So,
I don't even know what to
yeah.
say. But
Yeah.
I'm just gonna segue from there into a funny story about shamelessness.
Yes, let's lighten the
Okay.
mood a little bit. Uh,
Because because I actually did not realize how much I feel shame until about 20 years ago.
mhm,
I was living in Germany at the time, and Germans are kind of relaxed about being naked.
mhm,
Some of them are, especially like the generation of 68, as they call them. And I have a very close friend. So I think I was probably in my early 30s at the time. So still in
mhm,
the prime of my life. And she was, I don't know, probably, I think she's like 10, 15 years older. She's one of these generation of 68 people, I guess. A little bit on the young side for that. But anyways, she's also just very relaxed about her body. And we gone swimming and in a public swimming pool. We
Hmm.
were in the locker room and we're getting ready to go swimming. And her husband is American. His niece was there visiting. She was like 16-year-old. She was like 16 years old. She was on the swim team at her high school and stuff. So we were like, okay, we're all gonna go swimming at the public pool. We're in the locker room. And I'm standing between the two of them. And I was talking to this little 16-year-old because I'm like, it's an American, it's someone who speaks English, someone who speaks my English. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized she's standing there and she's like holding her t-shirt down. She got this big t-shirt on. And I realized, oh, she's waiting for me to look away so that she can change into her bathing suit,
Right.
which she did under her t-shirt. So I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. So then I turned to my right, so she was on my left. I turned to my right to talk to my German friend, and she's completely buck naked. Her bathing suit is wet, so she's struggling to get into it. She's kind of like hopping up and down, trying to pull on her bathing suit. Her breasts are like swinging back and forth because she's hopping up and down, and she's just
Yeah.
like talking to me like la la la, like none of this is happening. And I realize, okay, I feel shame because I would never, I would just never let someone see me in a position like that
Yeah.
because I would feel shame for my body, right? Even, and that's
Yeah.
and then, and then 5 minutes later, you have to walk through the showers to get into the pool area. And it must have been like old lady hour, the hour before we went in. And so there was
Old
all of
lady
these
hour.
no, seriously, these enormous, corpulent, very white, very chunky old ladies with these enormous blue veins and all this stuff. And they're in the showers and they're showering themselves. They're soaping between their butt cheeks in public, right? And I'm like, I definitely feel shame. And they clearly have none. So
The Puritan legacy of America
I was like,
is
I
affecting
definitely
you,
come
Christina.
from, I definitely come from a different culture.
Yeah, I mean, same here.
I
Like
wouldn't even
the
let my
first,
cat see me doing something like that, right? You
yeah,
know?
the first time I went to onsen in Japan was with my coworkers, and it was very awkward for the first, minute or so as they stripped naked beside me in the locker room, and I was like, this is so weird, but I am the only one who's making it weird, actually. The
Yeah.
weirdness is coming from me.
Yeah.
So I just need to deal with it. And, so I did deal with it.
And
And
life
yeah,
goes on.
and life goes on because, like onsen, you're just completely naked and that's totally acceptable. That's what people expect, like it would be weird.
They're
Like
still thinking
you're
thoughts about you, though.
oh yeah, probably. I mean, like probably that I'm like a
She's so
weird. Oh my God,
white, or yeah.
I had someone come up to me in the onsen and just like ask about being foreign and stuff like that, which my coworker translated. It's weird to get naked with your
Oh
coworkers.
yeah, I worked for a
If
bit in
you,
Sweden, and they're
yeah.
like, "Yeah, let's all go to the sauna." I was like, "No, thanks." No,
Oh, Christina,
just
come on.
no.
Such a bonding experience.
No, I
But
don't.
yeah.
No. Mm-mm.
No, but I mean, you start to realize that bodies are just bodies,
It's what you
like
live in. Yeah.
it's what you live in. And it helps you, like realize that other people are people as well, which is it helps cut down on the whole outrage thing, I
Yeah.
guess.
But let's talk about outrage and solar punk here.
Yeah, yeah.
So, to what extent is outrage a solar punk tool?
Hmm.
Right? So, I mean, I think it's probably not outrageous to say that as a sport, outrage is absolutely not a solar punk thing, right?
Yeah, no, it's not something that I think solar punks indulge in or should
I think
indulge
it
in.
is something that a few
Oh,
solar punks indulge in,
I
actually.
I I do think that I mean there are solar punks are made of all different kinds of people, and some of those people are unfortunately the kind of people who enjoy resorting to outrage instead
Well,
of
yeah, I mean, I think they probably feel justified, but
mm,
I'm not sure if everyone is admitting to themselves that they actually enjoy having social media fights, which I don't. They make me sick to my stomach. So, and I think also there are solar punks who enjoy canceling people and who also enjoy social media pile-ons. And I don't think those are particularly solar punk activities, although obviously these, uh, uh, everyone has to decide for themselves what outrage is
Yeah, for
justified.
people
So,
like subscribe to a belief set where apparently everybody is human and worth, like worthy of respect and stuff like that, they sure don't act like it. So,
oh, I'm not
but
sure everyone is worthy of respect, but
oh,
everyone is human and everyone,
or
yeah,
worthy of, an inherent human dignity, maybe. I don't
yeah.
know. I'm sure
I
that
mean, I think
like
that
there
you
are
can
people I
start from
think who
that as
have
the,
forsaken that. I
yeah,
think
I
there
think you
are
can start
people
with
who
that as
have.
the ground state and then let people
Yes.
lose
Yeah, yeah.
the right to be treated with un understanding.
Yeah, but again, I mean, it's very nuanced, like we just went over, like these are like there's so many caveats, right? And I just don't think that a lot of people think
I
that.
think at
I
the
don't know.
moment, most of us are erring on the wrong side. We're not
Yeah.
erring on the side of being like, okay, this person is human. They may have had a bad day. Their mother may be going delving into dementia, and they may have spent the last 3 weeks in the hospital.
Mm,
And they might not be their best self at the moment. They may have said something they didn't really mean, or maybe that you didn't understand, or maybe
yeah.
yeah, or maybe they just haven't figured it all out yet. And sometimes extending someone a hand helps them also get them onto your side and to change their mind. Whereas outrage just pushes them, if you treat them with outrage, you just push them further into their own position.
I I mean, I think sometimes just the left in general just likes to get outraged at each other for not being perfect enough. Like you're not the whole no true Scotsman. There's no true, like anarchist. There's no true Solarpunk. There's no true uh nobody can be as perfect as we want them to be. And maybe that has a little bit to do with our society's tendency to put people on pedestals and then get really mad when it suddenly turns out that they're actually human. And maybe that's why we don't extend the grace that they deserve.
I think
But
it's just a
anyway,
bad habit we've fallen into.
yeah,
But
I
I
mean,
mean,
like,
it's weird because on the left, like, yeah, we want a lot of the same things, right?
yeah, that's true. I mean, like, that's the thing is that within a group, Solarpunks, for example, we are not a monolith. We all want a lot of the same things. We want social justice and sustainability, some sort of government or social structure that works for the people and not for the rich and powerful, an economic system whose goal is the well-being of all people and not the GDP, etc., kind of thing. Like we all want these things. We might disagree on how we're going to get there. We might disagree on what we want that to look like. We might disagree on the means, but we have a general belief and hope for the ends, and I feel like that should be a good ground for finding common ground and being able to extend grace to another solar punk when they're acting, for lack of a better word, weird. Just give them the benefit of a doubt, kind of thing.
Yeah, and because together we're stronger. And if we're all
Mm.
pushing and if we're all pushing in the same direction, even if we don't, we aren't all clones of each other.
Yeah,
So,
and
I mean, this is,
say if they're a solar punk and they have beliefs that you think border on eco-fascism,
oh,
it's
okay, but
instead of canceling them, being like, why do you think that way?
that's
Do you
extreme though.
realize? Well, no, actually, if you have beliefs that border on eco-fascism, I mean, like it could be just that, like you believe that overpopulation is an issue, kind of thing, right? And
Well,
like
I think you can
that is a
believe that
very
overpopulation is
benign
an issue
thing.
without being an eco-fascist.
Yeah, I know, but the pipeline is very easy and it's very easy to get radicalized that way, you
Huh,
know?
okay.
So so gently sort of like intervening in that discourse and saying, okay, why do you believe this? Is this actually based on in science? Is this based in, like actual data? Or are you just afraid of people who aren't you overtaking your country or something like that? Like is this
I don't think those are
where
solar
is this
punks.
coming from? Some people think that they are solar punks and like have those beliefs. But you know what? There's a lot of people who come to solar punk and they're super excited. But they've maybe only been in the movement for like a week. And so they don't know everything. They can't know everything.
I don't
It's
know everything.
yeah, I certainly don't. And so benefits us to mentor other people and to learn from other people as well, like it's just spending that time,
Well, to
the
actually
not going for
listen
the
to what someone
yeah,
is saying and being like, okay, what is the root at what you're saying that to me sounds really terrible? Doesn't need to be as terrible as eco-fascism, right? But even
yeah,
just a little bit terrible or a little bit in disagreement with me, and to maybe not tell them what they should be thinking, but to listen and to hear what it is they're actually saying. Okay, then you can kind of maybe work on what's bothering them or understand what's bothering them. And then, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't
yeah.
know.
And
Because
sometimes
I
that
don't
would
also
take
have to tell people how to live their life or what to think. But I think if really you've got people who are on the left who mean well, who want these big things that we were talking about. This is social justice and sustainability and government for, or, social, like economies and social structures for the people and not for the privileged, the super high, mega elite privileged people. Then we have to figure out how to work together towards these good things and
yeah,
not just harp on each other because we aren't, we don't make the perfect noises.
yeah, we
Right. So I
can't.
think when someone's talking about something that borders on actual eco-fascism, that's different. That's then yeah. Right? I
Yeah,
mean, come on, we
I don't
all
know.
have brains. We can do nuance here. We
Yeah,
can
I've just
sort
seen
through
it
that.
so softly sort of introduced and then it goes badly. But like it goes badly because people don't really understand how their fear is being manipulated into this belief or outrage,
And so
right? And
maybe,
so
yeah, okay, but I mean, we're talking
maybe
about left people here. I mean, are left people also eco-fascist?
think about the deep green ecology movement.
I actually
Um,
don't know about the deep green ecology movement.
oh,
I guess
okay.
I live
And
in this little bubble where I think people are mostly nice to each other. I don't know.
okay, well, deep green ecology was sort of 70s and 80s or whatever. But like they were very sort of like anti-human to the point where they advocated for people to kill themselves because they were like, nature is what is important and we are terrible. And so they would celebrate things like, like mass, hurricanes and stuff like that.
Oh,
And it's
that's
like,
awful. Those are
yeah,
awful
yeah,
people. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not saying we should be like
So
extending
like
grace to
that sort of
awful people.
misanthropy, right? Like it's very
Oh, I'm
we
completely misanthropic, but even I'm like that's beyond the pale here. That's
yeah, I don't think you're as misanthropic as you
I'm
think.
really like people suck, but I'm not like people suck and they should die. I'm not like
Well,
that. I'm like people suck, but also we should try to understand people because
yeah,
life is hard. It's hard being a
gentle
human being.
misanthropy. Uh,
Yeah, anyways, I'm
yeah.
not saying I make sense, but I try to be nice to people and I try to be
Yeah.
understanding and I try to extend people grace. Like everyone, I don't always succeed, but I am mystified by all this outrage. I am just
Mhm.
mystified by it. And and
Well, if
I
Solarpunk is about supportive community, then is Outrage even a Solarpunk tool at all? Like, are there ways for Solarpunks to achieve social justice and sustainability that don't involve being outraged? Like, or is repudiating outrage just shooting this movement sort of in the foot? Like
right.
as
Okay.
we talked about before, outrage can be channeled into, like bringing attention to things that
Or
like
bad.
injustices that are terrible and stuff like that. Like should we forsake outrage entirely?
Yeah, no, of course not, because we're all about nuance. And
Yeah.
brains, using brains. But I think, I just think a lot of times we go down the outrage route with people who are maybe like in the center or even maybe, a little bit on the right, when
Hmm.
really we could bring them onto our side because there are things that they also want that are like what we want. But we cancel them instead. And
Yeah.
and and so I think we have to get back to a point where we can learn to work together with people. I'm not talking about people who are monsters or people who are racist or people who are this or people who are that, but people who just aren't super left, right? And
Yeah.
together we can become this block that pushes for transformation in the right direction. And we I think we also have to relearn to compromise on some things. It is because you can't get always what you want, but you can make progress. And that's not bad. It isn't bad. And I'm not saying you should be socially compromised or morally compromised or anything like that. But gotta keep pushing in the right direction. And sometimes that takes working with people you would rather cancel and be outraged about because it's fun.
Yeah. Well, and canceling an outrage, like it doesn't last very long. Like you don't have to invest too much time in it. Whereas if, say, you are a left-leaning solar punk and you're engaging with a more liberal centrist solar punk, who maybe believes in like some things like about centralized government or about philanthropy that you're like, I think you need more nuance in that. That it might take, the course of several conversations. It might take several months. It might take a year, like it might take a while for you guys to, have these conversations and to slowly bring them around to sort of where
Well,
you're at.
we
But
don't
like
we don't actually have to force people to believe all the things that we believe. We don't have to force them
that,
to
I mean,
think
that's
all the
fair.
things that we think. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes to get what you want, you have to work with people who have different opinions than you do. And of course, I'm not
Yeah.
saying you should work with monsters, right? We all have
Mhm.
brains. We can all decide this is beyond the pale or this is acceptable. I can work with this. I can't work with that, right?
Mhm.
We can decide, okay, that's so outrageous. I will be outraged about it. But instead of like canceling these people who don't have a perfectly aligning viewpoint with me, I can work with them and we can both get a little bit of what we want and it will be good. I think we should start being practical about some things rather than just knee
Yeah.
jerk, I'm so outraged because.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think if Solarpunk's interested in community and sort of healing the divisions in society, then I think it needs to just not use outrage as a fun emotion to wallow in, but to really take a step back and think, where is this anger coming from? And is it making a positive contribution to the ends of Solarpunk that I want it to? Like, am I outraged because of injustice, or am I outraged because that one guy said something mean on the internet?
Outrage, it's a powerful tool, but we should also like concentrate its power and retain its power for those situations where it's really called for. And
Yeah,
let
exactly.
outrage be this pure weapon again for when it's necessary.
Yeah, although I'm going to push back on saying pure because I hate that
Yeah,
word.
okay, but like pure. I was thinking like in Time Bandits where they've got the pure and concentrated evil. I was thinking of pure and
Right.
concentrated outrage. I didn't mean it. I meant it in a yeah.
I know.
Okay.
I'm being nitpicky and
No,
pedantic.
no, no, it's fine. As long as you're not
Yeah.
outraged by my little slip up there, it's all right.
No, you're good. It's fine. I can still work with you, Christina.
Okay.
In conclusion, wrapping up, saying that, like outrage, I think is something that can be like a useful tool, but it depends sort of like where is that outrage coming from and
And
what,
what people are trying to accomplish with it.
yeah,
If you're
exactly.
just trying to
So,
make someone feel
like,
bad or just trying to make someone shut up, I mean, then it's not useful, I don't
yeah,
think.
I would say, like, yeah, 85% of the time, if you're outraged, that's something that you might be being manipulated into being outraged.
Yeah,
Might
yeah.
be, something that, like you're being used as a weapon.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we talked
You
about a
cut that
lot
out.
about outrage on the left, but obviously outrage is also a huge issue on the whole rest of the political spectrum, and it is being
Hmm.
used to manipulate people. We didn't even touch on that because we were just talking about outrage and solar punk here. So,
Yeah, I don't know if I want to touch on that.
no, I think that would take hours. And I just want to
Yeah.
flag here that we recognize that outrage is not just an issue on the left and that outrage is a
Oh,
problem
yeah.
across the board. And yeah, it's totally being used to manipulate people, especially I think on the right side of the political spectrum.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where, like when I was talking about becoming emotionally literate, I really think that part of the reason why we are so easily manipulated into outrage is because we're just not taught to be emotionally literate at all. And
But
so,
also, I think right now is a really scary time for a lot of people.
yeah,
the,
that's
the
true.
the whole
Yeah.
everything's changing. We're switching over to electricity instead of fossil fuels, and climate change is scaring people so much they still want to deny it because they don't want to believe that it's
Hmm.
going to be a problem, a really scary problem for us. Like everyone, not everyone, sorry, I use everyone, but I don't mean everyone literally. Many people would prefer dictators who can tell them
Well,
yeah,
because again,
everything
then
will
you
be
don't
like
have to
this,
think.
and yeah, you don't have to,
That is easy,
and you don't have
like
to
it's
worry
like
about anything
outrage.
changing.
If somebody's telling you what to do, then you don't have to think, you don't have to spend time or your energy on figuring out what's right or what's not. You can just follow instructions. You can go on with your own life and your own priorities, and you don't have to really worry about other things.
About these
So,
big transformations. So maybe a super solar punk thing is to rather than be outraged at these people who are, not the really awful ones, but the ones who are like fearful and mild about all of this, and just to try and embrace these people and try and help them with their fear
yeah,
and
well,
try
and
and understand their fear.
I think it helps to approach everyone no matter who they are or like even if they're,
Oh no, some people
really
are
far
unapproachable.
right.
Sorry, some people are beyond the pale. And I think it's
Well, yeah, I
possible
know,
to
but
recognize that.
how will you know if people are beyond the pale if they're like just some random internet user and not like a
Yeah, yeah,
political
okay. I guess
person,
I'm
right?
talking about
Approaching them with,
people in real
the
life.
idea that maybe they're just very mild and they're thinking like they're fearful or whatever is a good way to start, Like not coming out of the gate with guns a-blazing
Yeah.
when it's an unknown quantity.
And
If
get
it's
to know your
someone,
neighbors
yeah.
and your parents' neighbors.
Ugh.
And try to find some common ground with the people who are worth finding common ground with. But maybe
Yeah.
loosen the definition a little bit because we have to somehow glue society back together. We all have to live with each other. We can't just find some empty part of the planet and have a little solar punk utopia or whatever, because it's just not possible. It
Yes.
doesn't, the world is full. And so
Yes.
we have to learn to live with all these other people who don't believe in all the same things we do, but yet there are some things we have in common.
Mhm.
And there are, yeah, and not everyone has only 100% horrible ideas.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's human and we're made up of very different sort of ideas and we contain multitudes.
Yeah, and not everyone is beyond repair, or not repair, but anyways, not everyone is irredeemable.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
I think Solarpunk is about understanding and communication and community, and so I think we should reach out to people who are not solar punks and who don't necessarily agree with, or who aren't necessarily politically left, and or any of these things, and just try and figure out how we can work together.
Mhm.
And I really think we should reserve outrage for situations where it is absolutely the right response,
Yes,
and
exactly.
not fritter it away on, not we should not be self-indulgently frittering it away because it's fun to be outraged.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I
Okay.
love it when you agree with me. Yay! Okay. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you for sticking with us through the beginning now, woo, here of season 6. Until next episode, have fun. And don't spend too much time being angry on social media. Thank you for listening to Solarpunk Presents, a podcast hosted and produced by Ariel, Kroon, and Christina de la Rocha.
The audio for this episode was recorded in part on the traditional territory of the neutral Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples.
And in Germany. The opening and closing music for this podcast is Water Cooler Gang by Monkey Warhol, available for use under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License.
Don't forget to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/solarpunkpresents.
Every little bit helps us keep bringing you discussions and interviews.
Until the next episode, keep dreaming.
And stay solarpunk.